The structure of fiction. When I was a kid, I had absolutely no idea how to write an entertaining story. I wish someone had whispered the phrase story arc into my ear. It would at least have given me a place to start. The hero's journey is something we feel in our bones. It is the story of human civilization. But let's make it explicit. What are its elements? We need a character in a situation with a well-defined problem who tries to repeatedly solve it, but he fails and, in failing, makes the problem worse. At the climax of the story, the hero makes a final attempt to achieve his goal. The result of this final attempt, of the race to the final confrontation, should unfold from the pattern of the hero's victories and failures during the rest of the story. If that sounds a bit mysterious, hang in there, I'll unpack it. By the way, this summary was from Philip Brewer's post, Story Structure in Short Stories, and I'll leave that link in the description below. So let's move on to talk about the inward and outward journeys. Let's break down the idea of a journey. There is usually an inward journey for the hero as well as an outward journey. In the movie Edge of Tomorrow, William Cage, and here we're talking about the inward journey, went from cowardice to courage. And in the outward journey, he went from incompetence to mastery. These two journeys, these two paths come together. They come together at around the all hope is lost point, if not sooner. Cage does something at the end of the story very brave just before the final confrontation, and this gets him through the all hope is lost point. Mastering his cowardice was essential for Cage winning the final battle. I go into more about this below. Opposites are good. This story structure comes to us by way of Larry Brooks' article, The Short Story on Structuring Your Short Story. Brooks writes, like life, our stories always reside somewhere along that same continuum of setup, shift, response, shift, attack, shift, resolution. For instance, in the setup, the hero, I like using the word hero rather than protagonist, is going through his normal everyday routines. He struggles with the neighborhood bully. He is in love with someone completely out of his league. He dreams of taking over the lucrative family business. That's the hero's ordinary world. Then something happens. There's a shift. It could be that the protagonist gets a magical golden ticket. It could be that a young boy sees a hologram and goes in search of an older, mysterious, rather dodgy character. In Lord of the Rings, Gandalf comes to Frodo, who had recently inherited the One Ring, and advised him to take it away from the Shire in order to protect his community. Okay, so another name for what just happened was the call to adventure. After anything big happens in a story, there's a response. In the case of Lord of the Rings, our heroes are chased by the Black Riders. But what I like about Larry Brooks' way of looking at things is that we really don't need a lot of fancy names. The ordinary world, the call to adventure, and so on. The key, the bedrock, is that something negative happens that derails the hero. And then something positive happens. That's the pattern. The negative things that happen keep getting worse, but the hero manages to keep going. Negative and positive. This back and forth keeps up until the hero and villain fight it out at the end and settle the matter once and for all. 2. Hook the reader early. Plant a hook in the first couple of lines of your story. Be bold. Here are a few first lines I think are marvelous. Halston thought the old man in the wheelchair looked sick, terrified, and ready to die. He had experience in seeing such things. Death was Halston's business. He had brought it to 18 men and 6 women in his career as an independent killer. He knew the death look. That's from The Cat from Hell by Stephen King. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal, thank you very much. That's from Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. There's just one more. It's very short. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. 1984 by George R. Orwell. If you think you have a good hook for your novel, but you're not sure, test it out on your friends or even random strangers in line with you at Starbucks. Tell them your hook and watch their face. That will tell you pretty much everything you need to know. Also, do they ask questions? Are they curious about what happens? I think it's a good idea to include your hero's perspective in the hook. Although that said, only one of the stellar opening lines I included above said anything about the protagonist, the cat from hell. As always, it's up to you. If it works, it works. Introduce the elements of a central problem as soon as possible. We've given the reader a hook. They've read the first sentence or two. Now we need to draw them into some conflict, some problem that is directly related to, connected to, the central problem of the story. Also, we will need to fulfill the promise of the hook, or at least give the reader enough information to make them curious enough to keep reading. Here are the first two sentences of The Sorcerer's Stone. I know I just shared the first sentence above, but this is one of the best first paragraphs I've ever read. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal, thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious, because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. Now, I thought the first line was a very good hook, but just look at that second sentence. Right away, the reader knows there is going to be a lot that is strange and a lot that is mysterious occurring in the Dursleys' life, and the Dursleys are going to hate it. I also knew right away that I would find the Dursleys' trials and tribulations humorous, because the Dursleys seem like perfectly horrible people, which they are. Show your readers your character going through his or her daily routine. Show them one problem that he needs to overcome, one problem that she is failing at. For example, Harry Potter is failing to fit into the Dursleys family. Unsurprisingly, he is failing to find people who love him. Of course, it's not his fault. The Dursleys are despicable people, but still, it's a problem. Why is Harry failing to fit in? Well, he's the offspring of someone who could do magic, and the Dursleys are terrified of that. They are terrified their friends will find out they're related to people who can do magic. They are terrified of being rejected. So the very thing the Dursleys are terrified of, they do to Harry Potter. To be honest, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is one of my favorite stories, both because it is very fun to read and because it is well structured. Try and fail cycles. Here's the way I think about the construction of a story. The hero starts his journey in the ordinary world, going about his ordinary life. He is secretly in love with the lead cheerleader, but she doesn't know he exists. He gets beaten up for his lunch money and so on. But then something happens that changes his situation. For Harry Potter, it was a letter that invited him to attend a school for wizards. Generally, at around the 25% mark of a story, the hero's situation changes. Often when something big happens, there are a number of attempts to change, but the first couple of attempts fail. For example, with Harry Potter, there were a lot of attempts to deliver Harry's acceptance letter to Hogwarts before he ultimately received it. One movie that is great at demonstrating this is Raiders of the Lost Ark. Think of the scene where Indy is thrown into the Well of Souls. Think of the number of times he tries to fight off the snakes, and then his torch goes out, and then he tries to climb a statue, and then it tips over, and so on. Midpoint Confrontation. This is where the hero confronts the villain, or where the protagonist confronts the antagonist, however you want to put it. Obviously, the protagonist can't defeat the villain here. If he did, the story would be over. What generally happens is the hero learns that he is wrong about something he believes about the world. He's wrong about something important, essential to the problem he is trying to solve. Further, he learns this because he confronts the antagonist. For example, in Edge of Tomorrow, William Cage at the midpoint, and by the way, this is kind of a spoiler, discovers that he's been tricked. He journeys to a location because he thought he could fight the Omega, the big bad, but he was met by alphas, run-of-the-mill bad things. He discovered he was being tricked. That was an important piece of information that significantly changed Cage's plans. So, in summary, at the midpoint, the hero fails in defeating the antagonist, but he learns something vital from the confrontation. The hero's plan, the race to the final confrontation. At some point, the hero comes up with a plan. Generally, this is somewhere around the 75% mark. Generally, there is some sort of group scene around this point. Your main characters meet in a bar, in a restaurant, and so on. The hero has a touching bonding moment with his band of travelers. Make sure the stakes are clear. What could the hero lose? What could the hero gain? Something goes wrong. Try and fail cycle. The hero is racing toward the final confrontation, but of course something goes wrong. The hero's plan was good, plausible, perhaps brilliant, but something went wrong and it failed. This is a try-fail cycle. The hero fails, then he tries something new, then he fails, then he tries something else, then he fails. Then, facing certain death, he tries a new thing in desperation, believing that if it works, he will die, but at least the antagonist will be eliminated. And that is a good thing, because it means his friends and family will be safe. And it works. Usually. Obviously, this is difficult to set up. In the movie Edge of Tomorrow, the protagonist Cage was introduced as a coward. That is what he needs to overcome. So when the final confrontation happens, we need Cage to be prepared to give up his own life for the people in his community, for humanity. And he does. All hope is lost. Toward the end of the try and fail cycle I just spoke about, the hero will experience an ultimate setback. He will fail, but he will fail in such a way that it seems there is no way back. At this point, often the A story, the outer journey, and the B story, the inner journey, will come together. Further, these threads come together in such a way that the hero sees the way out, the way to possibly win the confrontation. Resolution. Either the hero defeats the villain or not. In popular fiction, generally he does, and ideally it should be done cleverly. If you can surprise the reader here, but in a way that makes sense and grows from the hero's challenges, that is the stuff of which great stories are made. I urge you to take a peek at The Structure of a Short Story by Sarah A. Holt. It's an older post, but it's much shorter than mine, and she has a really good sense of humor. I've left the link in the description below. Thank you. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you again soon.